Hello, hello, lovely writers, and welcome to this week's Writerly Wednesday. I'm going to dive right in because I've been having this conversation with quite a few writers over the past few weeks, and I really want to take away this awful feeling of imposter syndrome. Now, one thing you may have caught from the title is, am I the only writer who struggles with imposter syndrome? Well, the answer is absolutely not. Every author that I've ever worked with and every author that I've heard of, including some of our most beloved authors like Maya Angelou, Neil Gaiman, let's mention any author you've ever read and love, has likely experienced imposter syndrome, whether they admit it or not. But lots of them thankfully do admit that they also go through it. So if you're not the only one, then we want to move on to the next step, which is, how do I fix it, right? My goal for you is to ensure that you move past it. Clearly, these other writers who have written multiple books, sold millions of books, have moved past it. How can you move past it? Well, let's dive in, number one, into what that core feeling is. That feeling that I've experienced, as I said, lots and lots, which is, any minute now, somebody's going to knock on the door. They're going to discover that, in fact, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm talking about, and I should have my access revoked. Or somehow I just fudged it and got away with it, and one day people will open their eyes and they'll know that I shouldn't actually be here doing this. Or maybe you are writing and you're thinking, I have no idea how I did it last time. Like, I know I did it last time, and now I can maybe say it was good, but I have no idea how I got there, because you are in the midst of maybe a first, second, fifth draft, and it's feeling really hard. Well, here are my top tips for helping you continue to move forward, even if you still feel pangs of imposter syndrome. Having the expectation that you'll never have it again is pretty unrealistic, sort of like anxiety. You may feel a little bit of it, but what's more important is that you persevere and you keep moving forward anyway. So my top bit of advice is actually to find a group of other writers, not necessarily a critique group, but a group of other writers or creatives, and you meet in a safe space to share your process. Again, not necessarily your words. If you've been around here for a while, you know how I set really strong boundaries about being really discerning about where and when you share your work. But over and above that, we all need a cheer squad who can help us move forward and share those things that make us feel vulnerable, because the second you start to admit how you are feeling inside that feels really difficult, you can see that they'll raise their hand and say, are you kidding me too, all the time, right? So even if you're running into comparisonitis with those famous authors whose books you read and you think, God, they're amazing, what am I even thinking of doing this for? Or maybe friends or colleagues who are also creatives or writers and they are moving ahead. I bet that even though you might be struggling with, wow, they're so great and what am I trying to do, they might be struggling even as they are moving through this so-called wonderful portion of their writerly life. They're still going to have those same thoughts and feelings. A group where you can go and be honest about your process and about your feelings, it can be massive to you and can really break down that wall between me and them. I feel this way, everybody else experiences it this way, because it's absolutely not true. The other good thing about a cheer squad is that, of course, they can help you in those times that you feel low, and they can celebrate you in those times where you have successes. I've talked about it before. I have a beautiful group as well, and that is one of the main components. That community is massive, and it comes to play time and time again, even when we're talking about things like this. Now, the second thing that I would say to help you move past that imposter syndrome is something that will really help you in breaking down something that our brains naturally do, which is we are like, as a beautiful friend says, Velcro to negative feedback. and positive feedback is like a Teflon feeling. So it slides right off, and we stick ourselves to maybe one negative comment, even if we have 100 or 1,000 positive comments. This is how our brain works, but there are ways for you to get around it. And that top way that I have is to write down every positive feedback you've got on a piece of paper and create either a positive feedback jar or a joy jar, something like that. I want you to have a place to go back to. You can put it in a notebook, right? Get yourself a lovely little notebook, pen and paper, write it down, tear it off, make it as colorful and beautiful as you want it to be, but have this central place that when you are feeling this, you can go in and pull out a piece of paper that reminds you of something beautiful and complimentary somebody said about your work. Really, really, really important. So do that. It can make a massive difference in how you feel. And just try to combat some of that negativity that we naturally hold on to because we want to better ourselves. We want to get better. But chances are, once you have that jar, you'll find that the positive far outweighs the perceived negative or even the practical negative. Not everybody is going to like what you write, and that's okay. But hang on to the positive. Stop ignoring the positive because it's just as valid, if not more valid, than the negatives. And then the last thing, if you've not tried this before, please open your mind to it. It's called tapping. EFT or tapping. EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Technique, and it is a practice that I recommend to all writers to help disperse that negative energy. So it is sort of counter to that spiritual bypassing, which is good vibes only, don't say anything negative, everything's positive, only look for the silver lining. I'm all for that. I'm a super optimist. And we have to admit that some of these negative emotions are there. And whether you give voice to them or not, these negative thoughts are running through your head. Tapping is really helpful because you start off giving voice to that negative thought. Even though somebody is going to show up at my door and tell me I absolutely am not a good writer and I should stop writing, I shouldn't create another thing, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. Now, your script can be whatever negative thoughts are running around in your head, but there is research out there to show that this actually works. And like I said, rather than having it get louder and louder and derail you from your creativity, what's beautiful is you get this out, you get these negative thoughts out, and it really does disperse that negative energy. Do it as many times as you need to, but it can really work wonders. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Number one, do you experience imposter syndrome? Number two, if you do, does it surprise you that pretty much everybody else that you're running into also experiences it? And if you do, have you tried anything to help yourself move through? We know, or rather I know, and I try to share with you, that the number one most important characteristic of a successful author is perseverance, right? So what are you using to persevere? I would love to hear your stories. I would love to help you. If you are curious about how we can support you in Writer's Flow, click on the link below. But otherwise, I will see you next week. I hope you give yourself the gift of spending time and energy on your project. You have a story to tell. It's time to tell it, even if dogs are barking outside. And I can't wait to see you next week. Bye, lovely writers.